7 days imprisoned and unlawfully deported because I chose to speak up for the people of Ghana. My name is Shalimar Abbiusi, and this is my story.
Shalimar Abbiusi, spokesperson of the new force.
Deportation as an affront to her fundamental human rights.
Violate her rights.
This was an ambush, right?
How terrible those conditions she suffered in custody.
The person must be released, but you keep the person for 7 days.
I went to Ghana for the very first time in 2017 to represent my country, Belgium, in an international beauty pageant. And I immediately fell in love with the country, the warm people, and the rich culture that Ghana has to offer. It wasn't until 2021 that I returned back to Ghana for holidays, and I fell in love all over again. It was when I was offered an opportunity to present a TV program that I decided to stay a little bit longer. But living in the country also revealed the hardship that was going on. The crashing economy, the despair on people's faces because of the inflation, the rising fuel prices, doom saw every day. People were in distress. And as a public figure, I do believe that we have to use our platform to create positive impact in society. And that is why I've always been involved in charitable projects and humanitarian work. Because the beauty of humanity is not in being human, but in being humane. Even as a child, I always wanted to help people, and I was always very empathetic. During my stay in Ghana, I've been involved in many charitable projects such as safe road crossing initiatives, breast cancer awareness, training programs for young girls, and then the Akosombo Dam spillage. I gathered my team and we collected relief items, and we decided to go to Mepe to donate to the victims of the dam spillage. It was there that I encountered the people from the New Force movement, and they told me about their vision, which is empowerment of the youth, industrialization of the country, and better living circumstances for Ghanaians in general. I felt that our visions were aligned. After a couple meetings with the New Force movement, we decided that I would become the spokesperson. A few days after, the first video came out with me as the spokesperson. And that video was so impactful that it reached over 1 million views within 24 hours. The voice of one woman is so powerful that it woke up a whole nation. Not long after that first video came out, I got a call from immigration. They invited me to come to the headquarters and ask me some questions about my residency. I willingly went. The officers made false allegations about my resident permit. I've been present in the media and I never had any problems until that video came to their attention. They told me I had to stay in the cell overnight. I was thinking to myself, is this really happening? I had to give them all my belongings. They forcefully tried to take my jewelry, my phone. They brought me to the cell at immigration. So many people in that cell, men and women together from all kinds of nationalities. And I was sharing my mattress with a Vietnamese lady. Some people were sitting there for 9 months without legal representation, without a court date, no hope for the future. The next morning, I was hopeful that I would get out. But then I was being transferred. I was asking them, where am I going to? And they didn't want to answer. We arrived at National Intelligence Bureau. They sat me in a room. I was waiting for hours. And then an inspector came and he told me I was under arrest. They would take me to my house to conduct a search, but they didn't even have a search warrant. My lawyer gave me the option to cooperate or to fight for my rights. And I decided to choose for my rights and to refuse the house search. They then took me back to the cells of NIB where I had to strip down, squat. I was being searched. I was being treated like an absolute criminal. I saw a document with my name on it and it said national emergency. What could I possibly have done? And it was also at that point that I knew this had nothing to do with my resident permit. I was given a prison outfit, 1 towel, 1 clean underwear. I was completely being stripped from my humanity. They took me to the cell, which was a horrible, big black bunker with a horrible smell. There was a stash of dirty mattresses. There was one other lady with me in the cell. She was an illiterate woman, and she didn't even know why she was there. She was in that cell for 4 months. No daylight, no fresh air, just the rotting smell of the cell. That night I cried, and I was so scared for what was about to come. The next morning, they took me back to my apartment. This time, they did have a search warrant. But again, they didn't want to follow the rules. The officers were intimidating me, yelling at me. Before my counsel and my independent witness could arrive to the location, they decided to just enter my apartment. I asked the inspector what they were looking for, and he replied that they were looking for something that I forged documents with. They didn't find anything, but they completely raided my place, and I was transferred back to the cells. My lawyer made a statement. It's been 48 hours. You cannot keep her any longer without any official charges. What they did then was so conniving. They took me, pushed me in a van, and told my lawyer to go and sit in another room. And I kept asking them, where are we going? And then I saw we arrived at court. They called me to the stand, and I decided once again to stand up for my rights. And I told the judge that I had a lawyer, and they intentionally kept me away from my counsel. But the judge then said that I would have to come back the next day with my counsel, and they would have to grant me a phone call, which they never did. The next morning, my lawyer was present. That was the first time I heard my charges officially. They charged me for forging documents to obtain a resident permit, and they wanted to investigate me for my activities in relationship with the New Force movement. When I heard my charges for the first time, I pleaded not guilty. The judge decided that I had to stay in the cell for 4 more days so they could conclude on their investigation. I ended up staying in the cell for a whole week. No visitation allowed. They constantly intimidated me, and I wasn't allowed to have one-on-one contact with my lawyer. And I really want to enable the critical thinking of the people here. I obtained this resident permit through an official immigration officer. I've been traveling in and outside of Ghana, going through multiple immigration checks with this same permit, and I never was questioned about it. This same permit got renewed by another immigration official. So my question is, who forged these documents to obtain the resident permit? Was it your own officials? They never could produce any evidence to the court. After a whole week of imprisonment, I was finally transferred to court. I couldn't believe my eyes when I arrived at the court. So many people were protesting, voicing out for my release. It was during that court hearing that I was finally granted bail. I was released on very strict conditions. My parents were visiting Ghana at that time. They were so worried for my safety. And finally, after a week after being released on bail, we had a new court date. That court date changed my life. When I walked outside of the court building, there was an immigration officer who shook my hand and told me, "Congratulations for winning the court case. We are revoking your residence permit. You're under arrest." They forcefully pushed me in a van. Everybody was furious because of this unjust treatment. I was being transferred back to a cell where I was kept until night. That same evening, I was deported back to Belgium. I wasn't allowed to take anything, nothing. This didn't break me. It inspired me to be the voice of the voiceless. Because if this is what they're doing to me, then how much more are Ghanaians and Africans suffering every single day at the hands of this flawed system? And I want to ask, if the legal system be overruled by the call of one single person, are we really living in a democracy? I hope that my story can be a testimony of resilience and inspire people to not give up, to not be a victim, but be a conqueror and a survivor.
Shalimar Abbiusi, has secured a landmark victory at the ECOWAS court after what many would describe as a harrowing ordeal in Ghana. The court ruled that her rearrest, detention and subsequent deportation in December 2023 were unlawful and a violation of her fundamental rights under Article 6 of the African Charter on Human Rights and People's Rights.